I was the hated side character in a story about a beloved heroine. After my mission failed, all I wanted was to die. I just wanted to go back to my own world. But when they realized I had truly lost the will to live, the very people who had once tormented me came back one by one, begging me to stay. They pleaded with me not to die, not to leave them. But I was already done with them. My mission to save the devoted second male lead had failed. I was supposed to change his fate, to stop him from taking his own life over the heroine's unrequited love. Instead, he walked out of our engagement party after a single phone call from her. When the crowd dispersed, I went alone to the rooftop terrace of Von Tower. I kept confirming with the system in my head, as long as this body is destroyed, I can go home, right? After receiving a definitive yes, I started moving, shuffling toward the railing. I had only taken 2 steps when a sneer cut through the air behind me. I turned. Another familiar face, Leo Sterling. My adoptive brother, though not by blood. I'd found him in an alley when he was 7 and taken him home. We were inseparable until he was 14, when his wealthy biological parents found him and took him back. The next time we met, he was just another of the heroine Sarah Roswell's fanatical admirers. The years I'd spent working 3 jobs to put him through school had earned me nothing more than a moment of excitement at our reunion. Once he learned I was, just as the rumors said, a venomous woman jealous of Sarah, he treated me with nothing but scorn and suspicion. Tonight, at my engagement party to Joey Vaughn, the news that Sarah had been kidnapped was enough to empty the entire hall. My fiancé was the first to leave. Before walking out, he grabbed my wrist, his eyes dark with menace. "This had better not be you," he warned, then turned and left without a backward glance. This was the 100th time since I'd been dropped into this novel. The 100th time he had abandoned me for Sarah. And so the system declared my mission a failure. A devoted second male lead is devoted for a reason. This so-called rescue was nothing more than the hubris of a mission runner and her system. A bitter smile twisted my lips when I looked at Leo. The old warmth was gone. "I don't know why you're still here, but you'd be wise to stay out of my business," I said coldly. "Any slower and you'll miss your chance to play hero for your precious goddess." After all, the so-called kidnapping was just a drama staged by Sarah and her family. Their goal was to ruin my wedding to Joey. Once everyone gathered to rescue her, she'd make her grand reappearance. Leo flinched, probably because I had never spoken to him with such ice in my voice. He opened his mouth to say something, but I had already turned my back on him. My mission had failed. There was no reason for me to stay in this world. The only silver lining was that the system had witnessed my tireless efforts and granted me an exemption from punishment. As long as I exited this world within the given time limit, I could avoid being completely erased. But the body I'd left behind in my original world was already dying from a terminal illness. I remembered my mother's eyes just before I was transported here, eyes full of gentle, heartbreaking sorrow. I bit my lip and quickened my pace toward the railing. "Faye, what are you doing?" Leo's voice, once dismissive, was now laced with urgency. He saw me getting closer to the edge. He was right behind me. "What kind of trick are you pulling now? You know this whole I'm going to die act doesn't work on Joey. Besides, after all the terrible things you've done, even if you died right here, right now, you'd never compare to Sarah. You." His voice broke off. From his perspective, he saw me vault over the railing without hesitation, leaping into the glittering city below. The world rushed up to meet me. The roaring wind tore against my ears, but it couldn't extinguish the soaring, joyful feeling in my heart. I was going home, back to my parents' arms, back to the love of my friends. I would finally leave all the years of suffering and injustice behind me. Almost there. Just a little further. I closed my eyes. The next instant, the sensation of falling was brutally cut short. A hand clamped around my arm, the searing pain of pulled muscles yanking me back to reality. I opened my eyes. Leo was clinging to the railing with one hand, his other locked around my arm in a death grip. "Let go," I said, my voice eerily calm. Leo's jaw was clenched. I couldn't tell if it was from the strain or something else, but his eyes were bloodshot, shimmering with unshed emotion. "Faye. You win this time," he choked out. "You put on a convincing act, but it won't change anything." "Joey." He let go. I screamed, unwilling to hear that name again. I started thrashing wildly, and in a desperate attempt to catch me, Leo leaned too far over the edge. My struggling made his grip precarious. We were both teetering on the brink of death. "Stop moving," he roared. "We're really going to fall." When I ignored him, a desperate breath hitched in his chest. His tone softened. "I can't just let you die. If you keep this up, I'll fall with you." "Do you really want me to die with you, Faye?" He used my old name, his voice intimate, almost pleading, just like back when we lived together, when we only had each other. Back then, Leo had been the only family I had. I'd spoiled him rotten, and he'd learned to get his way by being sweet to me. Now, I looked up into his eyes, once as bright as stars. He watched me, a flicker of hope buried beneath his forced composure. Was he waiting for me to respond? The thought almost made me laugh at my own sentimentality. And I did laugh. I looked straight into his eyes and spoke, each word a shard of ice. "Who cares if you die?" The color drained from his face. He stared at me, dumbfounded, as if he couldn't process what I'd said. His grip on my hand began to loosen. For a moment, hope surged in my chest again. But before his fingers could slip away completely, a gasp echoed nearby, followed by a chorus of shouts for help. Leo snapped back to reality and tightened his grip, eyes wide with a strange mix of fear and confusion as he looked at the hand that had almost let me go. Once we were both pulled back to safety, his usual combative demeanor was gone. He was silent. When I tried to make another break for the railing, Leo pushed through the crowd and grabbed my wrist, his grip like iron. "We still don't know what happened to Sarah," he declared, voice tight, eyes turning red despite his efforts to stay composed. "As the prime suspect, it's my duty to watch you." He noticed me looking at him and turned away petulantly. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw sorrow on his face. Sorrow for what? I scoffed internally. When Leo, the sole heir to the sterling fortune, had been kidnapped and abandoned by his parents' business rivals, he'd ended up wandering the slums. He was bullied by other kids, chased by stray dogs. Finally, with nowhere else to go, he hid in a dumpster at the end of an alley. It was the middle of July. The air was thick with flies and the stench of rot. He huddled there, a small forgotten thing, sharing his refuge with rats and roaches. His only act of defiance was calling out to me as I passed by on my way home from school. I pulled him out of that dumpster, cleaned him up, and altered my late father's old clothes to fit him. I was only 12 then, surviving on a small orphan stipend. I was a transmigrator, but at that time I hadn't yet remembered my mission. I had no special abilities, no cheats. To make sure Leo could eat and go to school, I collected bottles after class and washed dishes in a small restaurant every weekend. Because of child labor laws, I earned barely anything. I had to wash countless plates just to make a few coins. How many dishes would it take to wash away our bleak future? I didn't know. I just kept scrubbing, numb and exhausted. The sweltering kitchen air, the hum of a broken fan, and the endless layer of grease became the indelible memories of my youth. Once, I asked Leo why he had chosen to call out to me that day, out of all the people who passed that alley. He was just a little boy then, but he smiled and said he had watched for a long time and chosen me specifically, because he trusted me. That was the same Leo who, after being taken back by his family at 14, vanished without a word. The same Leo who once claimed to believe in my kindness but, when faced with conflict between me and the heroine, didn't hesitate to take her side. He would stand with them, condemning me, his voice ringing with disappointment and contempt. And now, thanks to his insistence on watching over me for Sarah, I couldn't find a single opportunity to end my life. After seeing me try to jump twice without hesitation, Leo finally realized this wasn't an act. I truly wanted to die. His attitude softened. On the way back, he even tried to counsel me with surprising patience. "You've done a lot of wrong things," he said quietly. "But Sarah isn't petty. If you just apologize sincerely, everyone can go back to how things were." I ignored him, eyes closed for most of the ride. I only stirred when he mentioned Joey. Seeing this, a self-deprecating smile touched Leo's lips. But I couldn't care less about his feelings. All I could think about was Joey, the man who loved Sarah so completely that I could never measure up. If I provoked him enough using her name, maybe he would kill me for her. Joey Vaughn was, after all, my mission target, the novel's brooding, devoted second male lead. He had a prestigious background, immense wealth, and a miserable childhood. Sarah had been the only ray of light in his youth. Even after he became a businessman powerful enough to shake markets, his devotion to her never wavered. In the end, after paving the way for the main couple's happy ending, he chose to end his life by leaping into the sea alone. My mission began in my sophomore year of high school, right after Sarah transferred and I awakened as a mission runner. By then, Joey had already fallen for her at first sight, captivated by the image of her sheltering a stray kitten from the rain. His love was quiet and profound. He would even accept another woman he didn't love, just to keep Sarah happy. That woman was me. At the time, Sarah mistakenly believed I was involved with the main male lead, Ethan Cross, and she was heartbroken. No matter how Joey tried to comfort her, nothing worked. So in the end, Joey chose to pursue me, to keep me under his watchful eye, close to Sarah. The laughable thing is, I truly thought my persistence had finally moved him. I even told the system proudly that with enough sincerity, you could melt even an iceberg. An iceberg can indeed be melted, just not for me. Joey returned while Leo was guarding me in the living room. I was so bored under his watch that I started playing a handheld game. Then, the maids' voices echoed from the foyer, welcoming Joey home. The next second, the console was slapped out of my hands. Joey's sharply handsome face loomed inches from mine. A suffocating pressure closed around my throat. My mind went numb, my vision darkening until all I could see were his bloodshot eyes. "Where did you hide her?" he snarled. "Where is Sarah?" Joey's fingers dug into my throat hard enough to bruise. Spots burst across my vision like black confetti. Somewhere beyond the narrowing tunnel, I heard Leo swearing, the scuffle of shoes on marble, the crash of my handheld as it hit the floor and skittered beneath the sofa. "Let her go," Leo snapped. "Tell me where Sarah is," Joey growled back, and his grip tightened. I lifted my hands slowly, palms outward, the picture of surrender. "Check the Roswell villa," I rasped. "The service entrance. Third door to the left. If she's not there, you can kill me with your own hands." He froze. Not because he believed me. Because he knew that I knew. It was a very specific corner of a very specific maze of hallways, one a stranger would never guess and an insider would never speak aloud, unless they were very sure. Leo wrenched Joey's arm away from my throat. "If she dies in your house, Vaughn, you'll never claw your way out of the fallout." Joey released me with a shove. I coughed and steadied myself on the back of the sofa, throat burning. His eyes were shards of brown glass. "You're coming with me," he said. "So am I," Leo said. "Call security, have them follow." Joey's lip curled, but he didn't argue. He turned, barking orders. In the space of a breath, we were in his car, city lights cutting ribbons across the windshield, tires spinning a thin keen from the speed. Leo sat behind me like a shadow with a pulse, his phone glinting, his gaze ricocheting between the back of my head and the GPS on the dash. "Why that door?" he asked. I kept my eyes on the blur of neon and rain. "Because the gardener thinks no one watches the service cams on gala weeks," I said. "Because Mrs. Roswell thinks the police are theater props. Because the man who handles their crises gets sloppy when he's bored." "You're guessing," Joey said. I smiled, small and humorless. "I'm remembering." His hands tightened on the wheel. The Roswell villa swam out of the night, a pale cliff of a house with too many windows and not enough soul. We took the side road past manicured hedges and entered through the service gate, 3 of Joey's men slipping into position ahead of us. The third door to the left opened onto a narrow staff hall lined with beige. Beige paint, beige carpet, beige art depicting beige flowers. The scent of lemon cleaner bit the back of my throat. At the end of the corridor, a second door was closed but not locked. Joey lifted a hand to stop his men and listened. Very faintly, like a radio tune just off station, a woman sobbing. Joey didn't wait. He shouldered through and found the performance in full swing. Sarah sat on a straight-backed chair, wrists zip-tied before her, mascara smudged into perfect moons beneath her eyes. 2 men in black knit caps hovered nearby, performing menace with the bored diligence of off-duty extras. One smoked. The other stared at his phone. A coil of nylon rope lay artfully at Sarah's feet, as if someone had read kidnapping essentials on a forum and checked off items with a helpful pen. For a beat there was silence, and in that beat Sarah's gaze slid over Joey's shoulder and hit me. It flickered, brightened, then dimmed into horror. She made a wet sound of relief and fear, a corsage of emotion pinned to a dress made of lies. "Joey," she whispered, "oh God, Joey." His gun was up. "Freeze." The men froze. One of Joey's security detail pulled the cap off the smoker's head, smacked the cigarette from his mouth, and patted him down. The other was already on his knees with his hands laced behind his neck, reciting a rambling speech about no harm intended, the words tumbling out like loose nails. "Untie her," Joey ordered. I stepped forward. "Don't," I said. Leo's breath paused at the back of my neck. Joey cut me a look sharp enough to shave with. "Failsafe," I said calmly. "You'll want to see it." Leo moved past me. He crouched by the chair and lifted Sarah's wrists. He didn't touch the zip ties. He turned them gently and showed Joey the seam, pre-sliced, cut almost through. A small tug, a perfect dramatic snap, is all it would take. Joey's jaw worked. Sarah's lower lip trembled. They cut them like that, Joey. They said if I ran, it would be worse. They said. "Phone," Leo told the kneeling man with bored authority. "Back pocket," the man muttered. "It's dead." Leo took it anyway and handed it to me. "You saw this coming," he said. "No," I said softly. "I've been living it." I unlocked the phone with a pattern I'd watched him use in a reflection earlier that week. People repeat themselves when they think no one is paying attention. The messages were exactly where I knew they'd be, a thread with a contact saved as caterer to, timestamps matching the hour before my engagement party. The script. The staging marks. The reminder to vacate the main ballroom so the reveal would land clean on social media. Leo read over my shoulder, his breath ghosting my temple. "Forward them," he murmured, to me, to Joey, and to the police. The men were already protesting. "We're contractors, we thought it was a prank," and Sarah, to her credit, pivoted with dazzling speed into a new role, wronged ingenue betrayed by her own parents' publicity machine. She worked moisture into her eyes until it trembled like pearls. Her voice fluttered. "Mom said everything would be handled," she whispered to Joey. "She said Faye was trying to ruin your reputation and this was the only way to prove you'd never leave me." His head jerked as if slapped. I almost pitied her. Almost. "Call your mother," Joey said, voice scraped raw. Sarah did, and the call went to voicemail, and in that quiet something fragile inside Joey made a tired, familiar sound, the sound an old door makes when it opens to the very same room. The police came and went. Statements were taken. The men were escorted past the beige flowers and into the blue and red night. A neighborhood dog barked once, twice, the second bark less sure of itself. Sarah was wrapped in an officer's blanket and guided into a waiting car. She never stopped looking back, skimming her gaze past Joey to me, as if I were a stain she might yet scrub from the page. When the cars had melted into the dark, Joey stood with his hands on his hips, staring at the imprint their tires had left on the crushed-shell driveway. Leo's phone pinged. He didn't lift it. "Go home," Joey said to me at last, without looking up. "Do not speak to the press. Do not mention this to anyone." I gave him my most winning smile. Should I wait at the altar or will Sarah be late to her next grand entrance? He lunged. Leo moved between us, a clean professional block that looked like it had been rehearsed 100 times in a mirror. For a breath we were a tableau, Joey's fury, Leo's restraint, my carefully cultivated apathy blooming like frost in July. "Go," Leo told me. "No," Joey said at the same time. I went. The system waited until I was alone in the car to breathe in my head. "Countdown," it said, calm as rain. 12 days, 5 hours, 18 minutes. Exit to avoid erasure. "You were early last time," I murmured. The goodnight kiss before the guillotine. The system didn't answer. It never answered to comfort. It was not a person but a clock. Back at the penthouse, the night wrapped its cold arms around the windows. Leo insisted on staying. I didn't argue. He positioned himself in an armchair like a self-appointed warden, jacket off, tie loosened, hair a little out of place from the wind. Once, that disheveled look had meant safety. Now it meant surveillance. "Drink water," he said. "Give me back my console," I said. He bent, fished it out from under the sofa, and handed it over without comment. I sank into the corner, back against cushions that remembered every argument that had ever happened in this room. Tell me why you knew, Leo said after a while. About the villa. The door. The zip ties. Because it's been staged 99 different ways, I said. On 99 different nights. The details change to keep the audience fresh. The story never does. You keep saying that word. He rubbed his temple. Audience. That's what we are, Leo. I kept my eyes on my hands so I wouldn't have to keep them on his. Movable props. Temporary grief. A quick pan across a crying face. The only people who get real arcs are the ones who were chosen at the outline. You think you weren't chosen? I thought of dishwater and heat in an alley that smelled like rot, of a boy who had called out to me and a girl who believed that kindness was an engine that would power the world if she just fed it enough of herself. I was chosen for the wrong story, I said simply. The next morning brought headlines with glossy names, and by noon the Roswell PR machine had spun and spun until the thread burned under its own friction. It wasn't that the public believed me. It's that they loved believing that someone like Sarah had been momentarily imperfect, then perfectly redeemed. By dusk, there were photos of her, pale but brave, stepping out of a precinct door. Joey stood half a step behind her like a shadow trying to be a man. At midnight he came home with that shadow still clinging to his shoes. He didn't look at me when he passed. I'm calling off the engagement, he said to the room. Congratulations, I said to the ceiling. He moved into my line of sight and forced me to see him. The first thing I noticed was the exhaustion carved into the delicate skin beneath his eyes. The second was the way his mouth kept almost forming my name and then deciding against it. You used me, I said. I protected you, he said, as if the words were the same shape. You put your hand on my throat. He flinched. Leo, who had taken to making coffee as if it were a neutral act, paused with the kettle in the air. Enough, he said softly. Joey looked at the door. Sarah's mother is talking to prosecutors to shield herself. There's more rot in that house than even you guessed. I guessed all of it, I said. You just didn't listen. His jaw hardened. Pack your things. You're moving to the beach house until this dies down. I'm not your PR problem, I said. I'm your wrong choice. He ignored me and left. I didn't pack. The system ticked, a metronome against the glass. 11 days. By the third day, the first of the hired kidnappers flipped, and the script I had read on a borrowed phone appeared on the evening news with most names redacted and mine in full. By the fourth day, Sarah went live, hand pressed to her heart, voice trembling as she said my name 15 times and forgiveness twice as often, balancing her mercy like a dove on her palm. The world applauded. Doves are lovely until they aren't. Leo watched all of it happen from my couch. At some point he stopped pretending he was here to guard me and started admitting, if only to himself, that he was here because the space between my breaths still frightened him. Eat, he would say. Sleep, I would answer. Sometimes we did each. On the fifth night, the system chimed, a different sound, like silver tapping crystal. Optional branch unlocked, the sea. I shut my eyes. No. The word echoed and came back smaller. Faye, Leo said. You just turned white. What is it? In the original script, I said, as if it were a novel we both had read and I could safely reference the margins, he walks into the sea alone. Joey. Leo's throat worked. Now? Soon, I said. I didn't plan to stop him. I wasn't a saint, I was tired. But I found myself at the pier anyway, my steps carving furrows in wet sand. The sky was a fresh bruise. A storm hunched on the horizon, dreamily undecided. I saw him at the far end, shoes in one hand, jacket over his shoulder, tie slack as a confession. The ocean was practicing breathing. The wind did its best to be a friend and only managed a series of clumsy hair tugs. You're late, he said without turning. I wasn't invited. He laughed once, a hard coin hitting stone. I invited you the day I answered Sarah's phone and left you at the altar. I stood beside him and watched the water try to unmake itself, wave after wave after wave. Grief is just repetition with a heartbeat. The ocean is a grief that learned patience. Do you remember, I said, the first time you saw her? You told me the rain turned her into a lit match. He closed his eyes. I remember. Do you remember, I continued, the first time she asked you for something that cost you more than money? He looked at me, then past me, then finally at me again. You, he said. She asked me for you. Yes, I said. And you gave me? He put his shoes down carefully as if they were newborns. Is that why you're here? To make sure I know the shape of the knife? No, I said. I'm here because the story thinks it knows how you end. He swallowed. And how do I end? You walk in. You don't come back. He considered that, hands in his pockets, wind snapping his jacket hem against his legs. What if I deserve it? He asked. You don't, I said. You deserve to wake up to the worst thing you've done and not do it again. Is that forgiveness? No, I said. It's arithmetic. He looked at the sea and I looked at him, and for a long time there was only the sound of waves trying on the pier in different sizes. Behind us, a gull decided we weren't edible and soared away. I can't undo it, he said at last. I can't undo any of it, Faye. You can stop adding to it, I said. You can go to therapy, which you will hate. You can resign from 3 boards and donate the salaries to the shelter that fosters the cats Sarah cries over in every photo. You can give statements to the police and to the press that don't make you sound like the knife was an accident that fell out of your hand onto the person you stabbed. You can apologize to me with your back turned into yourself while looking dead in the mirror. And you can not walk into the water. He stared at me like he had never seen me before, which was absurd. I was the most visible invisible thing in his life. You came here to save me, he said. No, I said. I came here to tell the truth out loud so I would hear it, too. And what truth is that? That I can't carry your death on my way home. The system's voice was there, soft as foam. Trajectory altered, it said. 10 days. Mission vector change detected. Joey's shoulders sagged as if he had been holding up a house and finally set it down. He turned, picked up his shoes, and looked at the sea one last time. Will you ever forgive me? He asked, not as a plea or a trap, but as a man counting. No, I said. But I won't need to. He nodded, and for the first time I saw him step out of the diagram someone else had drawn around his feet. He walked with the awkwardness of a newborn thing and the stubbornness of a man who had decided to do the smallest, hardest possible miracle, keep living. When I got back to the penthouse, Leo was on the balcony in his shirt sleeves, staring at the city like it might confess if he glared long enough. He turned when he heard the door slide. You found him, he said. I did. Did it work? I don't know yet. He studied me. And you? Still here, I said. He nodded, then stared out again. There's an old story, he said, about a starved boy who calls out to a girl because he's sure she will stop. He's sure because every time she passes the alley, she slows down as if the air is heavier there. He thinks if he calls to her, he will either live or die, but at least the waiting will stop. I leaned against the doorframe. Does the girl stop? She does, he said. And she keeps stopping for years. And then? She forgets to stop for herself. I didn't answer. He didn't ask me to. The next morning I found an envelope on the kitchen island. Inside were photographs from old surveillance footage I had never known existed, a 12-year-old girl slipping a roll into the pocket of a boy in a borrowed shirt, that same girl sitting outside a principal's office with a book upside down because her eyes were closed but she didn't want anyone to know she was sleeping, that girl again, and again, and again, every picture a small evidence bag of love. Where did you get these? I asked. Leo didn't look up from his laptop. I have people, he said lightly, then sobered. Faye, I should have been one of them sooner. You were a child, I said. I stopped being one, he said. And I kept acting like I was anyway. We let the quiet sit between us until it warmed. By the 8th day, Sarah's mother's plea deal was a rumor and then a fact. The hired men's statements cross-hatched neatly with transaction records. The caterer was a Roswell consultant who had orchestrated 3 other incidents in as many years. The city had a new villain, and the city did what it always did, pointed, gasped, moved on. Joey resigned from 2 boards. A press conference happened in which he did not cry or raise his voice. He said my name once and not as a shield. He did not say Sarah's. The markets did what markets do, they pretended morality and then followed profit. I spent the 9th day in bed, not from sadness but from a kind of deflation that felt like I had been inflated with the helium of narrative and was finally heavy enough to touch the ground. Leo checked on me twice. The second time, he brought soup and put it on the nightstand and then sat in the chair and said nothing at all. It was the best conversation we had had in years. On the 10th day, the system arrived like a courier at my door. 2 routes available, it said. Exit now for return. Or remain and relinquish system privileges. Remaining will finalize current body. Return will restore original timeline. What does that mean? I said aloud, restore. Original body parameters compromised, it said. Pain index high. Outcome probability low. You want me to go home to die, I said. It did not answer. It was a clock. Clocks are rarely cruel, they are simply indifferent. Leo was watching me from the doorway, one shoulder against the frame. You look like you're talking to a ghost, he said. I am, I said. It just happens to keep time. He waited. Leo, I said, do you remember what you told me once, about choosing me? He smiled, a small, real thing that didn't include his teeth. I do. You said you watched for a long time and chose me specifically. I did, he said. I would again. My throat tightened. I may not be here, I said carefully, much longer. He didn't flinch. He walked into the room and sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand in both of his. Then I will be here, he said, as long as here will have you. I'm not asking you to choose, I said. You're not a choice, he said. You're a fact. The system hummed, a soft electric sound. 9 days. 8. The numbers fell like snow, silently altering the world by simply existing. On the 11th night, the beach house windows reflected a sky stitched with lightning. A storm unfurled over the water like a bright bruise and then remembered, embarrassed, that it was supposed to be dangerous. I sat on the sofa with a blanket over my knees and watched rain draw lines across a world that had insisted on curves. Leo stood and sat, as if his body could not quite accommodate the amount of stillness love required from it. Tell me to stay, he said abruptly. I looked up. Why? Because I stayed before because you needed me, and then I left because someone richer said they did, and I don't trust the part of me that still hears money like thunder, he said, each word like a stone he'd carried too far. Tell me to stay. Make it an order. Give me something to obey that won't shame me later. I could have. I didn't. Stay, I said softly, if you would have chosen me even if I had never found you in that alley. He went still. Rain wrote its 1000th version of the same sentence on the glass. I would have, he said finally. I do. I closed my eyes and let the truth of it exist without asking it to do tricks. On the 12th day, the system's clock slid into the hours. On the 13th, it measured minutes. On the 14th morning, it spoke without prompting. Selection required, it said. Exit or remain. I stood on the rooftop terrace of Von Tower where the story had tried to end me the first time. The wind was gentler now, as if it had learned manners. The railing was the same height. The city was the same unrepentant miracle of ugliness and grace. I thought of my mother's eyes, gentle, yes, and sorrowful, yes, but also a little amused at the world like she had always been secretly in on the joke. I had wanted to run back into those eyes the way a child runs into a warm room. I still did. I don't want to die in either world, I said. No response. I won't have a second act built out of martyrs, I added. Not me. Not Leo. Not Joey. Not Sarah, even. Silence. The kind that contained listening. Then choose, I told myself, because the system could not love me into choosing and Leo would not coerce me. Choose the thing that is not a sacrifice disguised as virtue. I chose. Remain, I thought. This body? This terrible, beautiful, stupid, stubborn world. This boy who called to me. This man who asked me to tell him to stay and then stayed anyway. This version of myself who had finally learned to stop for the girl in the alley wearing my face. Acknowledged, the system said. Finalizing. Privileges revoked upon confirmation. What does that mean? I asked. Privileges. No response. I braced for pain, for the lurch of a train hopping tracks. What came was small, almost tender, a dimming at the edges of knowing. The outlines of the story receded, leaving rooms I could enter without stage directions. The certainty of other people's arcs dissolved like sugar in hot tea. The world became heavier. It became mine. Leo found me still at the railing. He came to stand beside me, shoulder a breath from my shoulder, the space between us a deliberate, careful thing we had both earned. Well? He asked. Well, I said. And? I'm staying. He didn't reach for me. He closed his eyes and opened them, and when he looked again his gaze had that new carefulness people reserve for art and recovery. Okay, he said simply. Okay, I echoed. We stood there while the city pretended it had only ever been itself. Epilogue is a word for fairy tales and lawsuits. What followed didn't deserve the first and barely avoided the second. It was messier than that, which is to say it was real. Joey kept his promises and some of mine. He went to therapy and hated it and went anyway. He sold a yacht and bought a clinic. He stopped letting his temper be the first language his body spoke. Once, much later, I saw him on television answering a question he didn't control with a pause that made room for someone else's pain. I turned the TV off and sat very still and allowed the unglamorous feeling of pride to wash through me and leave me clean. Sarah moved cities. She started a charity for something that was photographed well and did enough good to keep her donors' consciences polished. She sent me a letter with no return address that said only, "I think I loved the way you made him look at me more than I loved him." I did not reply. She did not ask me to. Leo learned to cook 3 things and burned 2 of them each time. He bought nothing for 3 months except a tarnished silver spoon he found in a junk shop because it looked like something my father might have used. He framed it like a photograph. He also framed an actual photograph, me at 12, asleep outside a principal's office, book upside down, my mouth a determined line even in rest. Evidence, he said when I teased him. For the jury that lives in my head. What do they convict me of? I asked. Surviving, he said. And saving an idiot who forgot he was allowed to. Some nights we held hands on the same couch where once I had not been able to breathe. Some nights we argued with the kind of viciousness only 2 people who intend to stay can afford. Some mornings I woke before him and watched his face make the microscopic decisions sleeping men make, to unclench a jaw, to soften an eyelid, to continue. On the anniversary of the night I almost stepped off the world, Leo brought me back to the rooftop. He had a thermos and 2 cups, and the nervous energy of a thief in a church. It's not romantic, he said, pouring very bad coffee into very small cups. But it's honest. Honest coffee, I said, tasting and wincing. Bold choice. He glanced at my fingers curled around the cup. How is it? He asked, meaning everything, not the drink. Warm, I said. It stays. Good, he said, voice rough. We watched the city blink awake. A crane lifted something heavy and set it down somewhere I couldn't see. A bus hissed into a stop and then out again. A woman on the sidewalk laughed with her head thrown back, and though I didn't hear the joke I liked it anyway. The system had been quiet since the day I chose. I sometimes missed its metronome patience, the way it made the chaos of other people's choices feel like math. But there was a new clock now, less precise and more beautiful, the beating of my own heart at a pace no one had assigned. Tell me something true, Leo said suddenly. I thought. The easy truths came first, like eager students. I set them aside. When the right one arrived, it did not knock. I don't want to be the heroine, I said. Not anymore. What do you want to be? He asked. Alive, I said. And chosen. By me. He smiled in that small way that always felt like an oath. Then let's live like that, he said. Slow and honest and rude to anyone who suggests we were written to do otherwise. I raised the bad coffee in a toast. To rudeness. To rudeness, he echoed, and clinked my cup with his. We drank. The sun, unbiased and indifferent and therefore perfect, climbed anyway. Somewhere a match flared under a kettle. Somewhere a door opened to a room that had been waiting for years. Somewhere a boy in a borrowed shirt called to a girl, and somewhere that girl, having learned at last to stop for herself, turned her head and smiled and answered, "I hear you," and kept walking toward the life that was finally hers.